The United States has spent hundreds of billions of dollars to win the AI race, and its own startups are quietly switching to Chinese AI to power their products. Not some startups, not a few rogue engineers cutting corners. 80% of American companies building on open source AI right now are building on Chinese models. No press release, no announcement, no controversy. Just a line in a pricing spreadsheet that nobody put on the front page. If you use any app built in the last 18 months, a customer service chat, a recommendation feed, a coding assistant, a content tool, there is a real chance the intelligence running it is Chinese. You just were not told. If you run a business and you are still paying ChatGPT or Claude API rates, you may be spending 40 times more than your competitor for the same output quality. The gap is not shrinking, it already happened. And if you invest in US tech, in AI infrastructure, in cloud providers, in the companies that were supposed to own this decade, the switch that just happened quietly in startup infrastructure is about to show up loudly in their revenue numbers. This is not a geopolitics story. It is not a national security debate. It is a price story, and price stories have a way of ending the same way every time. Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm that backed Facebook before anyone believed in it, backed Airbnb before it had a business model, 16Z backed GitHub before Microsoft acquired it for $7.5 billion, published data showing that 80% of American startups building on open source AI are doing it on Chinese origin models. This is not a claim from a fringe analyst. This is the most influential technology investment firm in Silicon Valley telling its own portfolio companies where the infrastructure is actually being built. When Andreessen Horowitz publishes a number, the industry does not argue with it. It adjusts to it. Here is how the switch happened, and why it happened completely invisibly. In 2022, the assumption running through Washington and Silicon Valley was identical. The US export controls on NVIDIA's most advanced chips would kneecap Chinese AI development. No access to H100s, no access to A100s, no access to the hardware stack that made large language model training possible at scale. The logic was clean. No chips, no compute, no competitive models. DeepSeek's engineers could not buy the hardware, so they rewrote the software. Instead of building a single massive model that runs everything simultaneously, the architecture OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google all use, they built what is called a mixture of experts architecture. The model is sliced into 256 highly specialized clusters. When you ask a coding question, 8 clusters wake up, the other 248 stay dormant. You are not running a giant brain. You are routing a precise question to the 8 experts who can answer it, while the rest of the system costs nothing to operate. They also compressed the model's working memory by over 90%, a technique called KV cache compression, which slashed the amount of GPU memory required to run each inference. The result, DeepSeek built a model that matches GPT-4 performance on standard benchmarks, reportedly for a training budget of $6 million. OpenAI's GPT-4 training cost is estimated at over $100 million. Same output quality, roughly 1/17 of the price to build, and a fraction of the cost to run. This is the loop that nobody in the Western press wanted to talk about. US bans Chinese access to chips. Chinese engineers cannot afford to brute force compute. Chinese engineers instead optimize the software architecture. Optimized architecture produces cheaper inference costs. Cheaper inference costs attract every cost-sensitive startup. Every cost-sensitive startup quietly switches. The ban designed to slow China down accidentally accelerated the efficiency advantage that makes Chinese models structurally cheaper to run. The weapon created the wound it was trying to prevent. And here is the part that most people miss entirely. The pricing gap does not come from cutting corners on quality. The benchmarks are public, providing a transparent look at the industry's current standing. Stanford's 2025 AI Index report found the performance gap between the best US frontier model and the best Chinese model is 2.7 percentage points, 2.7. And that is measuring performance. It is not measuring cost. When the models are equivalent and one of them costs 40 times less to run, the choice becomes obvious. Nearly erase the gap is not the right framing. The right framing is the cheaper model won. The numbers are almost difficult to process until you run them on a real workload. If you are a startup processing 100 million tokens per month, a moderate API volume for a product with meaningful user engagement, your monthly bill on Claude Opus is approximately $1,500. The same workload on DeepSeek's standard model costs $35, a massive saving. Same input, same output, and the results are indistinguishable in practice. And a bill that is 42 times smaller. No CFO signs off on paying $1,500 when $35 buys identical output. The switch is not ideological, it is arithmetic. It's about the bottom line. Alibaba's Qwen model line takes the efficiency logic even further. Qwen was not designed to win benchmarks, it was designed to be fine-tuned. The architecture is open, the weights are public, and the model can be downloaded, modified, and used freely. Modified and run entirely on your own infrastructure, your data never touches Alibaba's servers. Your prompts are not logged, your usage is not tracked. For a company processing sensitive customer data, healthcare, finance, legal, HR, this is not a minor feature. It is the entire reason the compliance department approves the switch. It's about security. You do not rent access to someone else's brain. You own the model. Running it on your own servers costs the compute you already have. This is why Airbnb moved its customer service AI to Qwen without a press release. It's efficient. The CEO mentioned it in 3 words in a Bloomberg interview: good, fast, cheap. That sentence would have been a major story 2 years ago. Today, it's the standard. In 2025, it is infrastructure procurement. This is the new reality of the AI market, arithmetic over ideology. Thank you for watching. Let me give you 3 examples that show exactly how the switch is happening in practice. From the most visible to the one that should make anyone betting on American AI infrastructure genuinely uncomfortable. The first is Pinterest. Pinterest rebuilt its entire content recommendation engine, the algorithm deciding what image you see next every single time you open the app, on Chinese open source models. Their CTO reported in an investor briefing that the new models are 30% more accurate and 90% cheaper than the American alternatives they replaced. Pinterest has 522 million monthly active users. Every single recommendation served to every single one of those users is now running on Chinese AI. No one announced it. It showed up in their infrastructure cost line. The second is Cursor. Cursor is the most widely used AI coding assistant in the United States. The tool that tens of thousands of professional developers use to write, debug, and review code every working day. When Cursor released a major product update, users did not wait for a changelog. They opened the code. Inside the new version, the inference engine was not American. It was Kimi K2, a model built by a Beijing startup called Moonshot AI. Cursor's co-founder had to acknowledge publicly on a developer forum that their flagship product was running Chinese AI, and they had not disclosed it. The developers who found it were not angry about the performance. They were angry about the silence. The model was better. The company just had not wanted to have the conversation. The third is the one that deserves its own paragraph. Mira Murati was the CTO of OpenAI. She was the executive most directly responsible for turning ChatGPT from a research demo into the consumer product that 200 million people use. She left OpenAI, raised $2 billion, the largest seed round in the history of technology, started her own lab, and the first tool she shipped to developers was a fine-tuning platform. A tool to help companies customize and optimize AI models for their specific use cases. The models she built the platform around were not from OpenAI. They were not from Anthropic. They were not from Google. They were Alibaba's Qwen, the powerful open source models from China. The person who built ChatGPT raised $2 billion to help companies get more value out of Chinese open source AI. If there is a single sentence that captures what has happened to the competitive landscape in the last 18 months, that is it. Here is what this means at a scale that goes beyond any individual company's infrastructure decision. The entire American AI investment thesis of the past 3 years has been built on a specific assumption that the best models would be American, that American companies would pay American providers to access them, and that the revenue would flow back up the stack to OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. That revenue cycle is how the trillion-dollar AI infrastructure build-out was supposed to pay for itself, but that assumption is breaking. Not eventually, now. If 80% of the startup layer quietly migrates to models that cost 40 times less and route around American cloud infrastructure entirely, that revenue assumption breaks. The startups that switched are not paying OpenAI API bills anymore. They are not paying Azure AI compute bills. They found a cheaper supplier. They are running Qwen on their own hardware or on low-cost inference providers. The trillion-dollar build-out needs paying customers. ByteDance plans to spend $23 billion on AI infrastructure this year. Alibaba committed $53 billion over 3 years. Those numbers are still smaller than what Alphabet and Meta are spending in the United States. But here's the difference. The Chinese spend is going into open source models that the entire world can freely download and run. Every dollar Alibaba spends makes Qwen better for everyone. The American spend is going into proprietary models protected behind API paywalls. Every dollar OpenAI spends makes GPT-5 better for those willing to pay. Those are structurally different approaches to the same problem. One of them produces a user base measured in downloads, the other produces a customer base measured in invoices. And this is not limited to the AI layer. It is the same dynamic that reshaped the EV market, the battery supply chain, and the solar panel industry. The playbook is identical. Chinese government backs open source or low-cost infrastructure, volume builds capability, and capability closes the quality gap. By the time the Western market notices, the switching cost is too low to make loyalty rational. China is doing this because open source is a weapon. You cannot out-cheap free, you can only out-quality it, and the Stanford data says the quality gap is 2.7 percentage points and closing. Europe is watching this play out from the worst possible position. The continent trains more AI researchers per capita than either the US or China. It then watches them leave. To San Francisco, to Singapore, to London, because the EU AI Act raised compliance costs. Mistral's CEO wrote publicly that European developers operate under a fragmented legal environment, while others develop under permissive rules. Europe is producing the talent. It is not capturing the value. In the current competitive environment, that is not a disadvantage. It is an exit. The question is, can the West respond before the gap vanishes entirely? So here's the question worth sitting with. Every time in history that a technology has shifted from expensive and closed to cheap and open, from mainframes to PCs, from licensed software to Linux, from proprietary telecoms to the public internet, the companies that won the next decade were not the ones who invented the technology. They were the ones who figured out how to apply it, package it, and distribute it into industries that the original inventors never thought about. That window is open right now. The models exist. They are free to download. A company processing sensitive customer data can run Qwen on its own servers today with no API bill, no data retention agreement, no dependency on a vendor that can reprice at any time. The infrastructure cost of building an AI product just dropped by a factor of 40. The question is not whether Chinese AI is safe or whether the geopolitics are clean. Those are real considerations and they matter for specific use cases. The question is simpler. When the tools that were locked behind corporate budgets 6 months ago are now free, and the gap between the free version and the paid version is 2.7 percentage points, who captures the value in the space that opens up? Because the window between early mover and too late is always shorter than it looks. And the startups moving in silence already know which side of it they are on.